that common sense conversation.
Lively debate, now with 0% drift and dither.
Always read the label. A roadmap for the future of debate. Talk Radio.
Good afternoon, you're listening to Rob Render at Drive on Talk Radio with Skills for Life. Unlock your potential and learn the skills or get the qualifications you need to get the job you want. Search Skills for Life. And I want to say hello to Phil Clark. Hello, Phil. Thank you for your extremely thoughtful and lovely tweet about our political panel. Before the break, we were with Alfie Sterling, Chief Economist at the New Economics Foundation, and Patrick Timms, Editor of Walls of Westminster. And we were getting into it about wokery in general. And I think you were saying, Alfie, before we were coming to Patrick, and I don't want to wrongly summarise what you're saying, that you can spin more than two plates at once. Patrick, you were coming in on that. I want you to do that quickly because there's been more criticism of people that have voted for Brexit. What did you want to say, Patrick?
Just very briefly, thank you, Rob. I think you were asking the question, why is it that we're talking about these kinds of things? Both of you were saying why we talk about these kinds of things. I'll tell you why. Politics. Right. And this is what we mean when we refer to the culture wars. When these kinds of things are going on, when these kinds of people in pubs are doing this kind of thing and the Sun is reporting on it, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, so many more examples we could give. I will keep this brief, but really what it tells you is that this is politics. It isn't anything else. Mm-hmm. And I think you're quite right to point out that most people would rather get on with other things. But the only real point I just want to make briefly is that, I think this is the takeaway that people should have from this. There is always politics going on when something like this, A, is happening and B, is being reported. That's the thing we ought to focus on. And the fact that actually politics has its place. There are important things that people call culture wars that are going on. Right. But perhaps it's time.
That was the view of the think tank Class that was on yesterday. This is being driven by the government because they don't want, it's understandably, lots of communities that realise that they're in a shtuck and about to get worse with inflation and so on and so forth, talking about the fundamental things that are chiefly affecting their lives. What they really want is those communities to be frankly in conflict with one another, so they can't build any meaningful sense of solidarity. And to that extent, nothing is more polarizing than Brexit. This is a question, of course, that the European Parliament has thrown into the arena like a social Molotov cocktail. Britons didn't know what they were doing when they backed Brexit, according to the European Parliament. I'll go straight to you, Alfie. There'll be people throwing things I would have thought at their radios right now. Are the European Parliament right?
No, I think they're wrong, and I understand why that would frustrate people. I think it is patronising. Look, I'm a Remainer. I voted to Remain. I think that one of the things that the Remain campaign got wrong, and people that view still continue to get wrong, including seemingly members of the European Parliament, is that people were solely voting on an economic basis. Mm-hmm. I do still think that Brexit will be marginally more damaging to the economy on average, overall, over a long period of time, than not leaving the European Union. I've always thought, actually, and I'm, speaking as an economist, that it's been a bit overstated as to how much more damaging, but it will be a bit more damaging. But in the end, that's not actually what people were voting for. Mm-hmm. They're voting on the basis of sovereignty, on perceived democracy, and on identity. And it was the failure of Remainers and actually continuing, those that putting forward this view, European Parliament, to talk up the positive counter-arguments in terms of the Union and the identity of the European Union, the peace process, collaboration internationally. It was missed out, and the economics of it was overblown.
Do you think it's even worse than that when you talk about identity, that the people who, I keep using this language, but it's undoubtedly true. I get letters from them. I go to those parts of the world to deal with cases in that part of the world that are the least powerful and the ones who are going to be most effective by issues such as, Article 28, free movement, whose services are the most squeezed, were frankly insulted and continue to be insulted by being called racist when they're not, and that formed a particularly ugly part of the Remain agenda. Patrick Timms?
Well, I may have to be quite boring again as well and agree with Alfie on quite a lot of what he said.
You don't have to be boring and agree. You can do it interestingly. You're doing quite all right, Patrick Timms.
Well, let's put it like this. Look, I think, so this report has come out. It's a report that's come out from MEPs. So it's come from the European Parliament. Mm-hmm. And it's a report that says that people, this is the language we always keep using, the people didn't know what they were voting for. More specifically, though, if you look at it, it's saying that the government, the UK government, had no plan, and of course that's something that's been floating around for the past 5 years, for Brexit. Now, in a lot of ways, they're right. But I think the trouble with the argument is nothing like this has ever happened before. A country the size of ours, the economy of ours, contributing as much as we did, leaving a trade bloc of this. It's never happened before. I was saying this 5 years ago when people were saying, oh, they had no plan. How could they have a plan? It's never been done before. So it's one of those things where I think, I'm not sure what this report, which was produced by them, and I must add for them, was supposed to be telling us that we didn't already know. No. Yes, it's true that the case was presented, various cases were presented. The UK government supported Britain Stronger in Europe. Sure. The Vote Leave campaign as well, you had that. Right. But nobody had any idea what was actually going to happen if there was a vote to leave. David Cameron certainly didn't, and he was resigning.
Well, using Alfie's language, I mean, talk about not winning hearts and minds, and the word patronising, the idea that the European Parliament took the view that British people didn't know what they were doing when they voted back Brexit is not exactly going to win endemic sympathy in this country. I don't know if you're aware, but it turns out that Number 10 are asking the Met Police not to publish the photos from the Downing Street lockdown parties. It's going to be interesting trying to get the two of you to disagree with this. I can't see how they could be legally embargoed, and that is my field, and actually a bit of a, in terms of where the media and criminal law intersect with one another. That's what I used to deal with. I don't know how they're going to go about doing that. Alfie, do you think the Met shouldn't publish the photos until the outcome of any criminal investigation?
Well, I'm not a lawyer and don't have a legal background like you do, but just on the principle, I think it's highly problematic that politicians can be giving, or political interests can be giving directive to a ongoing specific police investigation. The role for the police is to set the laws, to set the rules, for that to go through due process in Parliament, and then police have to have operational independence. The only thing I would say on the specifics is I think there is a clear public interest case for the public to know as much as possible about who is involved and to what extent. And so on that basis, I think we should see as much as possible.
So it is a difficult one. I mean, if there is going to be a successful criminal prosecution, it's important, regardless of who you are, and especially where there's a high-profile trial, that you protect the integrity of any criminal trial and make sure that the evidence isn't subject to prejudice, either of a magistrate's court, which I suspect this is where it would be tried, but certainly if there's some sort of jury trial. That's why there may be an embargo. It's one of these big stories, but we get down in the weeds with
Rob,
it.
can I ask you on that? Why then does that need to come from Number 10 or come from... Why? Which sure the police would follow that process?
You would have thought so. I can't answer that question. In fact, I'm literally asking for that to be researched at the moment, and I will get in touch with my sources and get back to you. I would be very, very surprised if it is, in fact, Number 10 asking for it, if it's been told in that way, or if there's been a conversation with the various prosecutorial authorities, the Metropolitan Police and Number 10. Number 10 ask the question whether or not these can be embargoed. The story then emerges and becomes Number 10 asking for the pictures to be squashed, when there's a fact general agreement by everybody in the prosecutorial side of things that it's probably, and the defence, it's probably wise to keep these under wraps. Do you know what I mean? Becomes a big story for, a reason which isn't entirely clear or logically or frankly legally correct. Patrick Timms, should we see the photos?
Well, look, if I can try and give my reading of why I think this has happened in the way that it's happened. I think probably what this is doing, I did read this story, and that story did mention that Sue Gray has already said she is not going, as part of her inquiry and her process, to publish those pictures. Now, I expect probably, if it is Number 10 or whoever else it is, as you quite rightly question, what's probably going on here is an attempt to harmonise that across the public sector and various organisations. Now, I'll tell you when I would have a problem with this. If it was the press they were trying to gag, if they were saying, the Telegraph, the Times, or whoever, or the Guardian, the Independent can't do this, they can't publish these photos, and I would say that was an extensive infringement of the freedom and independence of the media. But in this case, it's not the media, it's the Met. And I think what they're doing is harmonising that approach to the investigation across all of the public sector institutions that are covering it. And that from an administrative point of view, I can understand it.
Sure, especially if there's going to be a trial, you need to protect the integrity of it. Ever pleasure listening to you, Alfie Sterling, Chief Economist at the New Economics Foundation, and Patrick Timms, editor of Walls of Westminster. I do wonder what's in those photos. Who knows? We may see Matt Hancock pole dancing. You never know. There's got to be some way or some explanation for how it was that he punched up and managed to get girlfriend of that quality. What can I tell you? I can't believe I've just said that on the radio, but it's too late. Rob Brinder, you're listening to Talk Radio.